Okay, everyone, welcome in for another great episode of Time for Forgiveness. My name's Robert Pascuzzi, Bobby Pascuzzi, and I've got my beautiful bride here with me, Kelly Pascuzzi, and we're really excited to have Peggy McColl, one of our very, very dear friends, joining us today. And this is going to be a fantastic episode for all of you listeners because Peggy is going to share some wonderful insights from her life and all the things she's done to inspire people around the globe. So I'm going to get more into Peggy and her bio here in a minute. Obviously, our objective at Time for Forgiveness is to help everyone out there learn and grow and be inspired. So I know we're going to do that today in a big way. And before we get started, just a quick commercial. Please help us get this, this podcast out. If you're enjoying it, you can share it with your friends and family, all your platforms. And again, we're at timeforforgiveness.org. On Instagram and Facebook, and please like and share as well. So that said, Peggy, welcome into Time for Forgiveness. So great to see you.
So great to see you too, Bobby and Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know that this conversation is going to be so insightful and it's going to really help a lot of people. So we're so glad you're here.
All right, and you guys can see we're starting to get the camera thing down here. There is Peggy in Ontario, Canada. So Peggy, what's new and exciting in Ontario and in your world?
What new and exciting? Wow. Life is exciting. Every day is exciting. I look at life as you wake up in the morning. That's a good place to start, right? I just find life exciting. Every day is a gift. So we've got to unwrap it and use it and then share it with others.
Well, we're going to do that in a big way, and I'm going to read your bio here, okay, just to introduce everybody to who you are. So after spending nearly half a century studying the characteristics and technicalities of manifestation, Peggy McColl has over 35 years, that's probably longer than that now, Peg, I'm thinking it's over 40 years of experience in transforming the lives of individuals by helping them manifest their best versions. Peggy's entrepreneurial maturity spans close to 3 decades. From beginning the founder and president of Dynamic Destinies, Inc., an institute designed to guide individuals, authors, and entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, and employees with the most compelling and strategic goal-setting techniques of our time. Peggy has garnered the title of becoming the most renowned personal development expert. Not only is Peggy a best-selling maker, driving you to reach your goal and becoming the best-selling author, but she is also the New York Times best-selling author herself. From fiction to nonfiction, she has authored over 20 books, translated into 37 languages, and sold across 100 countries. Wow. I love reading that, Peggy. You've done a lot, and you're just getting started, as they say, right?
That's it, exactly. It's actually over 21 books. I'm working on another one right now that's called Today is Cash.
So what is that going to be about?
Well, if you've ever heard the quote that yesterday is a canceled check, tomorrow is a promissory note, but today is cash, it's all about finding the value in the day and making the day valuable as well. That's what it's all about. So it's going to be written in a very unique way. I've started the book, I haven't finished it, but it's going to have a story about a gentleman who changed his life, transformed his life, and then it's going to be the practical application of what did he do.
We're going to start out, I think, I'd just like you to introduce yourself in more detail to our audience and let them know who you are. And obviously, your story goes back many, many years to your childhood, and I know quite a bit about it. But I'd love for you to kind of go into those details because your story obviously translates into who you are now and everything that you learned, but how you overcame a lot of the struggles and a lot of the setbacks and negativity that you had to find your way through so that you could become who you are today and impact the world like you're doing. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you kind of roll that out to our audience, and then we'll have some questions from there.
Absolutely. And the whole idea behind sharing the story is not to just talk about myself. It's really to help people understand that I've experienced a tremendous amount of pain and abuse, if you want to call it that, in my lifetime. But what's great about that, which may sound like a strange thing to say, where the blessings are in that experience is that I understand what it's like to get to a point in your life where you feel like you can't go on. So I was raised in a home, the youngest child of four, had two older brothers and an older sister. And I say had because one of my brothers died, and my parents. And the six of us lived in a 600 square foot home. It was rather small. There were two bedrooms. I mean, I'm grateful that we had a house. I'm grateful that we had the bedrooms. I'm grateful that we had food on the table. At the time, I didn't feel grateful. At the time, I just felt sad and hurt and miserable because I was abused. And I was never told that my parents or anyone else loved me. So by the time I got to my teenage years, I just wanted to die. I didn't feel worthy of living. I didn't think life was worth living. And I went to a park one day to end my life. But the thing that stopped me from moving forward was a thought that came into my consciousness on how that would really hurt my mom. And my mom had been suicidal as well. And she had attempted suicide a few years before that. And so obviously that was a model that I had in my life. And I just decided not to go ahead. But I continued to live in misery until one day wherein I was invited to go to a seminar that was being delivered by a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor. And this was in January 1979. So it was a long time ago. And Bob had been in the business of personal development, but had decided to get out of the business. He had actually left the business, but a gentleman that was working for a company where I worked found him and begged him to please come and do this kickoff event for all the employees of this corporation. And I was working there at the time. I had graduated from high school, barely. I mean, I was a straight D student. And I'd come out of high school, managed to get a job, was miserable in my job, was already accumulating debt. And I was told that we had to go to this event with Bob Proctor. And if you're that kind of person with a very negative mindset, a destructive mindset, there was no way I wanted to go and hear some speaker. And so I was trying to get out of it, but I was told, you have to go. So I went to the event thinking I'll just find a seat in the back of the room and I'll sneak out at the first opportunity. So I got to the room just a few minutes before it starting, and the room was packed. It was a ballroom at a hotel. And there was someone on stage sort of getting things organized, and she waved me in and said, sit right here. There was a front row seat. And so Bob came on stage. And if you were ever blessed to be in his presence, which I know both of you have, and Bob came on to start speaking, and I'm sure I was sitting there like a kid with my mouth gaped wide open going, oh my goodness, it's like life altering. And one of the things that really stuck with me, there were two things that night that stuck with me. But the first thing was when Bob had quoted Vernon Howard, and he said that you can't escape from a prison unless you know you are in one. And I was in a prison of my own making. And I just thought it was everybody else's fault that my life was a mess. I certainly wasn't taking any responsibility for it whatsoever. And when he said that, it was like a wake-up call. And then he said that if you want your life to change, you must change. And I realized then that I had an opportunity that I had to seize. And it was a decision. It was a decision that I made that evening that I'm going to change my life. And Bob offered a series of seminars. It was his goals seminar that he used to do at the Skyline Hotel near the Toronto airport. And I signed up. And I mean, I remember giving them my credit card, and it was when they used to run them through a machine. So it wasn't automatic and authorized. And I gave it to them reluctantly, thinking, I don't know if this is going to go through, but I'm signing up. And I signed up for his seminars. And of course, that's really where the change in understanding began. And I took the 8-week seminar. And when that was done, I took it again. I just repeated it and repeated it. And if he recommended a book, I would devour it. I didn't just study it, I would devour it. And he also had cassettes for sale at the time. I bought everything. I became like an addict for these materials because I started to feel better. And it was like a life preserver that had been sent to me. And so I just dedicated my life to, first of all, to change it, to fix, my own, way of thinking and way of being. And after several years of being deep in the study and after experiencing positive change, I thought, you know what? I bet there's a lot of people out there that are in emotional pain, and I want to help others. So I decided that I was going to incorporate my company and do my own seminars and do my own programs and things like that. And that's when I established my business, and I've been in business now for about 30 years, and I love every minute of it. It never feels like work. It just feels like a gift that I've been given.
Yeah, and Peggy, thanks for sharing that. And Kelly, Peggy obviously introduced us to Bob, and we were very impacted by Bob Proctor as well. Unfortunately, Bob passed on a little over a year ago, but he impacted so many people around the globe for Peggy, 60 plus years, and we were fortunate enough to be two of those and actually grow into a very fond relationship with Bob, where he impacted our life in so many ways. And so it's a little Bob Proctor commercial. If you don't know Bob, check him out. And he lives on today, right, Peggy, and everything that's out there, and you can still learn and grow from Bob. But Peggy, going back to one thing you said that it's an awareness thing, that sometimes we're in a prison of our own making and we're not even aware that that's happening. And I think this can lead to a lot of challenges in our life for many, many people. But also, I think it can put us into a negativity trap, a scarcity trap in so many different ways. Kelly, do you have any points that you'd like to run with on that we can kind of get Peggy going on?
I want to go back.
Your mic. You can have your mic up.
I want to go back, Peggy. You mentioned how you were raised, and then to think that you're in this room and you're open to what he's saying instead of rejecting it and having the mindset that, you can't trust it because nothing ever had seemed to really go well for you. I'm just curious why you were so open at that moment.
Wow, that's a great question, Kelly, because I don't think I was open. And I love that you even noticed that. I don't think I was, but as Bob had just mentioned about Bob Proctor, is the man just commanded attention. Have you ever had like a teacher or someone who speaks to you and you're like, or you've seen them in schools where a principal, they just like command, they're like authority and they just command attention. Right.
They walk out and everybody knows that this is who you're going to pay attention to immediately, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's what happened, is that it's like Bob used to say this often. He used to say that when he was speaking, that a lot of people in the audience would think that he was speaking to them. And he had a gift of doing that. I really feel that. I now know why, because I've shared the stage with Bob on many occasions. And he used to say, like, I remember the two of us standing at the side of the room ready to go on stage one day. And I turned to him and I said, "Are you nervous?" And he looked at me almost like he was disgusted. Like, "No, are you?" And I said, "Yeah." And their ballroom was filled. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there. And I was feeling anxious. And he said to me, "Well, it's because you're thinking of yourself." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you got to think about them." And I said, "Well, if they weren't there, I wouldn't be feeling nervous right now." And then he said, "Look, there's somebody in the audience that needs to hear what you have to say. Speak to them." And I've never forgotten that. And I really feel that was Bob's philosophy when he stepped on stage, is that he knew somebody in that audience needed to hear what he had to say, and he was speaking to them. And that night, I felt like he was speaking to me. That's what I felt. Now, there could have been 150 other people in the room that thought the same thing, and I'm sure there were, but it definitely impacted me.
Well, I'm obviously it impacted you, and you know, your whole direction of your life changed from that evening. But then I would guess that the direction of your environment with your family changed, even though they weren't making the decision, but you changed. So then, was it interesting after you started getting into this work and started studying this and thinking in a different way? What did that look like in your family life in that environment?
I love that. What a great question. You know, I think about the two of you bringing your three sons to Bob Proctor's seminars, and what a great gift that was for them. You know, to be there. And as you know, from getting into the study and then applying what you're learning and then experiencing positive results, it's like you just feel like you found the best kept secret in the world and you want to tell everybody about it. And so that's what I felt. Like I felt the same way. I want to bring my whole family into this because I understood that, you know, my parents were doing the best they could with what they knew. It's not that they didn't love us. It's not that they wanted to treat us the way they treated us. They didn't know any better because they were treated that way or even worse in some cases. And so I realized in that experience that, you know, that my family had an opportunity for growth too. And because I loved them and cared about them, I wanted them all to come. And so I managed to get some of my family members to come to Bob's seminars. But I remember, you know, one of my relatives just wasn't into it. And they just, you know, weren't attracted to the information. But they never criticized me, they were never against it. And the reason is because they started to see the positive change. They started to see how my life was getting better, how I was better, how I was feeling better, how happy I was. And, you know, they saw the positive impact of the materials. So they never felt bad about what I was doing. And it probably wasn't until I became an author and I was running my own business where they started to get more involved. And I remember my mom was coming to my seminars. And at first she said to me, well, I'll come and I'll help. I'll help with registration. I said, oh, that'd be wonderful. And so she'd come and we'd be driving back to her place and I'd say to her, so what did you think? And she goes, oh, it was really good. And I said, did you write down any goals? Did you work on any dreams? And she said, yeah. And so I asked her, I said, well, share them with me. And so she read me her list. And at the bottom of her list, she wrote this. And when all of this happens, I will be grateful. And I said, Mom, I love that you wrote your goals. But in fact, when you're grateful now, that's when you're going to attract it. So feel grateful in advance, like feel grateful as if those goals have already manifested in your life. And so I did start to see a change in their lives. And, you know, the other thing is your show's called Time for Forgiveness. And, you know, I know there's a lot of people that get angry about the way that they've been treated by others. And, you know, it is what it is. Like I often will say, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. I have a happy childhood now because that's what I focus on, right? Like that's what I'm looking at. So if I look at the old 8mm movies that my father used to take, and I can see us tobogganing down the hills, or I can see us out on the little pond skating, or we're camping, or we're at the cottage and we're playing with the canoe or whatever. I'm just going to focus on the wonderful times that we had. Or my father used to do a lot of recording of our Christmases on his little 8mm camera. And my parents were very generous. They were very, very, very generous. So I think if you can look for the good in anything, look for the good in anyone, you will find it, but you have to look for it.
Now, that's very powerful to share, Peggy, because I know, you know, what we focus on expands. And so you're choosing to focus on what was good, and there were good things, even in the bad. We've all had them to some degree. There's something we can be grateful for, and I think what's important about that is it's almost impossible to feel gratitude, that emotion, and feel something negative at the same time. So, you know, listeners, if you're struggling with something, what Peggy's saying is go to gratitude, and a great way to do that is start your day with 10 things that you're grateful for. Write them down. We can all come up, even in the worst case scenario, we can come up with 10 things we're grateful for because they are there. And Peggy, as you grew, then and things started to change in your life. Was there a point where you felt, and maybe this never happened, that's okay too, but did you ever go back and have a discussion with your parents and tell them your feelings and say, hey, I'm letting this go? Or did you just do that internally and that was just something that you worked through on your own?
Yeah, I just did it internally. It's like, I understood that they were also hurting. And that's why I wanted to get into business, because emotional pain is not something that we can always see. Like, it's not always evident. But if someone's in physical pain, we can see it. Emotional pain, we don't always see. And even those that are in deep depressed states, where they don't want to live anymore, it's not always obvious, right? And we hear these stories all the time. And so what I chose to do was just be an expression of love, because I knew what they needed was love. I heard this quote years ago that goes like this: the ones that need love the most deserve it the least. Now, everybody deserves love. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. Everybody, really needs love. But if somebody is acting inappropriately, it's very likely because they're starving for love. And I knew my parents were too. So that's a longer way to answer the question, but I never had the conversation with them. And I feel that it's kind of like a child learns from observation. And I think my parents learned from observation as well, because the dialogues that would go on. I remember driving to visit my parents and thinking, well, this is going to be interesting, because they were very negative people and they watched the news all the time. And, they are always finding what was bad in the world. And so I would arrive at their home and they start talking about something and it wasn't good. And I would throw back something that was positive and try and get them to look at it another way. And then they throw back.
Shift.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a ping pong match, right? Like, I'm sending over positive, they're sending back over negative. I send over something positive, and eventually someone's going to win, whoever is, really going to stay connected most to their energy, or you just, you just get exhausted. But I know the challenge of changing your mindset, the commitment that's required. And they had never really bought into the idea that they wanted to change theirs. And I really believe that you have to make that commitment to make the change before you're ever going to experience any kind of positive results. So I don't think they ever decided that they were going to change their life.
So Peggy, I'm in the audience and I hear you, like I'm listening, and intellectually I understand everything that you're saying. But emotionally, I'm saying, well, Peggy, you don't understand what I went through. And I see you now living this amazing life and you're successful, but see, I'm still stuck. And it's too late for me. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, it is a great question. I hear that often, like, is it too late for me? And I have a short answer and then a longer answer. And the short answer is, if you're still breathing, it's not too late for you. You can make the change. But it's going to take an enormous amount of work. Like, there is work involved, as you guys know. I mean, this is daily work that you're working on. But what I learned, very early in my study, which was, 45 years ago, is that it doesn't matter what you're watching as far as videos are concerned, or listening to as far as podcasts are concerned, or reading as far as books are concerned, or listening to audios in your vehicle or on your phone. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What matters is whether you are implementing. It really is about implementation. You don't even have to understand it, but there is study, understanding, and implementation. And the part that really will make the difference in somebody's life is the implementation. However, here's the challenge. We're habitual beings. We are habitual in our ways. Now, that's good news, and it's challenging news. It's challenging news because if you don't work on changing them, you're just going to continue to do the same things over and over again, and you'll never get different results. Very likely get worse. However, if you do change those behaviors, if you, like Bob, you said a moment ago, to write in a gratitude journal in the morning, 10 things, that is profound. That will change somebody's life. And it's not just writing it in the morning, it's bringing it with you wherever you go. and just really noticing, what's great in this world, what's great in your life. There is always, I have a sign on my bookshelf behind me that says there is always, 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 always something to be thankful for. And I absolutely believe that. So if you can go to that, like go to a place, even if it's just an incremental, feeling good place, then you can just, you get to another plateau, and then you can rise up and rise up. And so just decide that every day you're going to invest some time in studying, but don't just study, apply what you're learning. When I wrote my 19th book, and I have 21 of them out there now, this one's Savvy Wisdom. And this is really based on my life in meeting Bob Proctor. So the main character is Sophie, who meets a guy named Savvy. That's Bob. I'm Sophie. And in the beginning, where the story begins, Sophie's sitting in a park. She went there to kill herself. She meets this guy, and he says to her, I want you to start writing down what you're grateful for. And sure, you can do it in the morning, but this is a great place to start. Like, do it. We're listening to the podcast, like, do it. Start right now. Like, grab your pen, start writing down, what am I grateful for in my life? And there's always something to be grateful for. And, I've been through challenging situations. And as you guys know, a couple of years ago, I went through probably one of the most challenging experiences of my life. But I didn't go to a why me or poor me kind of way of thinking. I just started thinking, okay, what's great about this? Where are the blessings? Now, that's not normal. And it's not normal. But if you look at results, you look out there in the world at what the results are, we've got 97% of the people on the planet that are earning 3% of the money, and 3% that are earning 97%. That's not normal. But why is it? Anybody can do it. Anybody can create success, but there's only a fraction that are doing it. Why? Because they're breaking their old habitual ways, creating new ones that are more positive, more progressive, that are empowering, that are supportive, and they're doing it every single day. Like, I know for the two of you, you wouldn't even think about approaching your day without implementing the practices of getting into the energetic state of feeling as if you already have that which you desire, because that's what we do. And that includes being thankful for what you have now, because when you're thankful, you're in a feel-good state. And when you're in a feel-good state, you attract good. Does that mean nothing bad is ever going to happen to you, or nothing challenging? No, you're going to have challenges too. Everybody does. It's just part of the cycle of life. But when they happen, it's going to be interesting, because you're likely going to respond very differently if you hadn't had any of the training or hadn't built any of these emotional muscles that need to be built. And, I think what a lot of people...
Peggy, can I stop you right there? Because I want to ask you a question. This all ties into mindset, right? We're basically talking about mindset. And you hear a lot about mindset coaching and these success coaches and all this stuff. But when we say, when you think of mindset, what do you really think of? And what do you think listeners need to really understand about what does it mean to have the right mindset?
Yeah, I think of the mindset as a way of being. It's like, how are you showing up every day? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Like, those are the most powerful force. And when I think of the mind, I don't think of the brain. I think the mind is a consciousness. We've got the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and everything we've taken in our life has made an impression in our subconscious mind. And so, we want to change our life. We got to change what's going in. And it doesn't happen like that. It happens through space-time repetition, unless you've had some kind of a major emotional impact, which of course can also change your mind. But usually the way that you change your mindset is through a space-time repetition of new ideas, and only those ideas that are going to support the kind of results that you're looking to create.
How does this relate to forgiveness? Because I think there's a lot of people that are held hostage emotionally for whatever reason. There's something that happened in their life, or it could be something that they're holding on that they can't forgive themselves for. So it's not always another person. It could be something that they need to move through personally. But what do you think, first of all, what, in your opinion, what are the downside, the negatives about staying stuck with that emotion? And then conversely, what do you tell clients on how they can move through that, and what's the best way to learn how to forgive and experience, obviously, the profound impact of being able to forgive and move on.
Yeah, it's a letting go process is really what it is. And the truth is that if you're holding anger or resentment or hostility or any negative emotion, it's like poison. It will kill. It absolutely destroys. It can destroy the physical being. It'll destroy results as well. And so forgiveness is important. And I have found, like, I think about what you guys are doing and, you know, your book, your movie, your show, and all of that. I found that the one person that I really needed to and did forgive the most was me. That's who I needed to forgive. Like, even as a teenager, you know, when I started drinking alcohol, I was just like a party waiting to happen. And there were a lot of parties, and I was hosting some of them as well. But I would do stupid things when I get drunk. And I found it to be an escape. And so later, when I realized, you know, what I had been doing or the way that I had been acting, I had to forgive myself, because it certainly was never going to serve me to be upset about it. You see, I really like to simplify things, and I really believe this: when you feel good, you attract good. When you feel bad, you attract bad. So if you're upset or you're holding any resentment or anger, how are you feeling? Bad, right? Who's it hurting? You. And so you need to change it, right? And so I just forgave myself. I did what I did when I did it. And here's a very valuable lesson. And I don't think we need to minimize this in any way, because this is a very valuable lesson. Bob Proctor used to say, you cannot change the time you got out of bed this morning. So what does that mean? It's in the past. There is nothing you can do about it. It's done. Forgive yourself, move on.
It's a canceled check, right? It's in the past. It's over. But what can we do? We can learn from it, right? We can learn from it, and we can use it for positive, and then it's not a negative if we're learning from it, right? Kelly, I know you had a question you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I want to go back to, and I know, you know, it starts with, that's probably one of the hardest people that we get to forget is ourselves. But it does start with letting go of the past and understanding now I look at my past in a very different way, and I use it for what it's meant, is education for the present now. But when you say, well, you know, you grew up the way you did and you were able to find the good, and that's a habit you have to form to find the good. But then you're like, well, I understand that my parents did what they did and I just let it go. I just have to go back to that, because did you really just let it go, or did you find throughout the years that maybe some of those feelings were still there and you were like, that's interesting, and you got to go back to work on that? Or maybe you did just let it go one day and it was done. And if so, I guess, what was the process? You had to have a process with that, because it, in some way, I think maybe the audience will go, that's trauma, like growing up in, like you said, an abusive or verbally abusive, and just to be able to let it go. A lot of people say, I don't know how to do that. Maybe they're still talking to that old conditioning, but I think part of it too is they have a feeling that if I let go of that, then I let go of the control. And it's the one thing that I have control of. So I guess I don't even know if that question, but I just want you to talk to that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there is, it's like an evolution. And I think that's one of the reasons why people sometimes feel challenged when they start to study these materials and apply these materials. And sometimes it takes years. You know, they're studying and they feel like they're applying, and yet they're not seeing any positive change in their life. And then they're wondering, why is it not working? And it could be it's just the gestation period. I mean, if you're really doing the work, but it is an evolution. Like, when I think back, when you're asking the question, Kelly, I'm thinking, did I just forgive them and let it go? I'm sure to some degree I did, but then it comes back. Why? Because everything that we've taken in has made an impression in our subconscious mind. It's there, right? The abuse is still there. It's a part of me. I remember asking Bob, I said, when does it stop? one of these paradigms stopped putting up a battle. And he said, never. They're always going to be a part of you, but that's why the replacement is so important. So I would notice, like I noticed I'd feel anger. Anger would come up. And I think, what am I angry at? And then I think, well, as a little girl, there's no reason why that little blonde curly head girl was beaten like she was beaten or treated the way she was treated. And now if I see a child in a store and a parent doesn't treat them right, oh my goodness, it just like triggers something within me. So what I do is I have something called a switching technique. And it starts with awareness. You got to notice. So let's say I'm in a store and I see somebody abusing their young child. Then I'll start to feel my own anger come up, and I have the awareness to notice it's there. Okay. All right. So what can I do about it in this moment? Where's the blessing? Where can I find good in this moment? Should I say something to this parent? Should I attempt to distract them from what they're doing to find something? And so that's immediately what I'm thinking about. But this idea behind a switching technique is to just ask myself an empowering question. Okay, well, what's good about this? Or where's the blessing in this? Or how can I use this? Or, what will I do about it right now? And how will I change the experience of it in this moment? And I'm just constantly looking for a way of creating a better result with the scenario that's there. But most of the time, this conflict that's going on is within our own mind. That's where the conflict occurs. So when it's there, like when any kind of, unsettling feeling comes in, I'll just ask myself an empowering question. What would you love right now? How would you love this to turn out? What would you love to have manifest? And I just ask myself better questions, or I'll remind myself of something like your success is absolutely guaranteed, because everyone's success is guaranteed. It's whether you get in alignment with it or not. So I'll remind myself, maybe use an affirmation, maybe ask myself an empowering question, but I have all these little techniques at the ready, that I can just pull upon them and use them so that I get out of the negative as fast as humanly possible and get back over to a positive mindset, a positive frame of mind. That's what I do. So what happens is in the beginning, it, feels a little awkward and you may not do it as often. And it may feel like you're not getting anywhere. You might feel like you're 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But if you keep doing it and keep working at it, you'll find that it gets a lot easier and the flow is much better.
Right. And Peggy, so that's we all have these habitual, habit patterns, right? Ways of thinking, acting, responding that a lot of times are unconscious. We're not even aware of, well, that's just the way I am, or I've always thought that way, or what. And so you're saying we can take control of all this, and especially, I think again we're talking about forgiveness, and I love the question. Questions are power. Quality questions, quality answers. Crappy questions, crappy answers. And like you said, Peggy, we're not going to feel good either. And so what I love this question that Tony Robbins throws out there a lot. What else could this mean? What else could this mean? Whatever this is. And I think, when we're trying to move through things like forgiveness, that can be a powerful question. What else could this mean? Maybe there's something here I need to learn. Maybe I contributed to this in some way, or else, try to get around the other side of the table and look at it differently. Wayne Dyer has that wonderful quote, when you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. Maybe we need to change our perception of the situation. And why would this person be thinking or acting this way? Maybe we, as you said, maybe we can find some compassion there, even though we don't agree with it, we don't like it, we don't think it's right. But at the same time, if we can get into that mindset of the other person, then we're responding instead of reacting. And I know, Kelly, this is the thing. Audience, I'm going to be very transparent. It's the thing that I've had to work on probably the most. It's one of the, I'm going to go to my wife and see her expression. But it's been one of the challenges in my life because that's what I saw growing up. It was a very reactatory, I grew up in an Italian-American family. It was, high volume, a lot of yelling, a lot of reacting immediately, 0 to 80 in 6 seconds. So that being said,
I can relate.
yeah. But honey, I know you in your coaching too, like Peggy, you teach a lot about this, but it's shifting the way you look at something. And do you want to compound on that in terms of maybe how some people in the audience could be thinking of techniques, strategies on how they can move through things, especially with a forgiveness scenario on looking at things differently?
Well, I think one of the things that, and I'm sure Peggy have heard this too, it's just an idea that I've accepted, and it's something that, I have instilled as habit. No matter what is happening, I am constantly telling myself this is good. And you really do have to form the habit to go find it. And that is something that is so hard to master, is the ability to respond instead of react. And it's such a small millisecond that we have. But the more that you do it, the easier in some instances that it does become. But I am very aware that whatever is happening, I've really decided this is happening for me, and it's here to teach me something. And there's value in it. And so that being said, I want to ask you, Peggy, if you go back from where you started to where you are now, there's so much there that, like you said, the good that was there, and it's working for you, and it's serving you, and it's caused you to be the person that you are today. How did that help you in regards to that health scare and that health experience that you just said that you got to work through these last couple of years? How did that benefit you? Because when you say that, there's good in everything, what helped you prepare to go through that experience? Because the way that you went through it is very unusual for how most would have moved in the direction of that.
Oh, absolutely. I think if anybody gets a diagnosis of metastatic cancer, it can be scary, right? And I would say if you put 1,000 people in a room and you ask them, if you were given this diagnosis, would you feel fearful? And I'm pretty sure they'd all say yes or hell yes. It's just,
Right.
something that you're going to experience. And I definitely felt fearful
gut
as well.
punch, right? It's left field. Here we go.
Yeah. And so I felt it, but I didn't go to gloom and doom. And now I understand we're all going to die. I mean, that's just part of this process of life, right? Like nobody's going to escape that as far as I know anyways. And so I was thinking like, I'm too young. Like I got a lot to do. This is not the right time, for this. But I immediately just went to what's great about the scenario. But where I found that the teachings, the programming that I had put into my consciousness, since studying in January 1979, I felt that I was really strong, like in mindset, like real strong, like rock solid Gibraltar, like I'm not moving away from that. And so even though my physical body was experiencing, somewhat of a health challenge, I just decided that I'm going to use my mind to go through this experience and not have it be enjoyable, because I wouldn't consider it being an enjoyable experience. It was a version of hell, honestly, because it was awful. The cancer, as you guys know, was in my mouth and my neck, and I was getting radiation. And it was after the first 2 days of treatment that all of a sudden I couldn't swallow, and ended up with a stomach tube and all of that fun stuff. But there was a period of time where I was hospitalized, for weeks, and I was so weak and I couldn't keep anything down. I don't know whether I had radiation poisoning or what it was, but I was so sick. And it wasn't the cancer that was making me sick. It was the treatment that was making me sick. And we've heard that, right? Time and time again. But, I'm laying in a bed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at that point. And I figured, woohoo, this is an opportunity to just, feed my mind. And so I listened to my Power Life script, which is a process that I started back in the 90s. It's a description of my life as I choose to live it. And I record it and I listen to it on my headphones. And I had, a couple sets of earbuds with me at the hospital. I had other headphones that I could plug in. My phone was always charged. I had my laptop with me as well. I had all these tools. I think some of the nurses thought I was setting up an office there, but I wasn't. I was just feeding my mind and feeding my mind and feeding my mind. And I actually didn't do all the treatments that they had suggested because I couldn't. I was just too sick. And I know my oncologist was concerned about it. And I said, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Like, don't worry about it. And I went for the scan after the treatments were done. And she called me a couple of days later and said, I just want to let you know it's all gone. Like, it's completely clear.
Wow.
But I knew it was, because even though I went through the experience, I didn't identify myself as one with cancer. I had it. And I saw it as temporary. And I want people to understand how important that is. It's the same thing with whatever challenges you're going through in your life. Don't see it as permanent. This isn't your lot in life. This wasn't predestined for you to go through this hell. I just saw, well, it's a temporary situation. But you know what? It helped me understand other people going through something like that. Like, I have so much more empathy for that kind of experience because I went through it. I know what it's like to get that kind of diagnosis. I know what it's like to go through the treatment. I know what it's like to not even have the strength to stand up. And yet you want to, and you have a desire to. And like, even, today I went out to pick up something at the store, and I just feel so grateful to be healthy enough to do that. Like, I think sometimes we take things for granted, like when I was, little things, right? Like being able to, throw a load of laundry in, or whatever. I mean, I couldn't do anything. And I was relying on, thank God, my husband is the wonderful man that he is. And I'm very blessed that way. And my sister basically moved up from Toronto and moved in with us to help. And she was there helping, in every way. And I allowed, it's not that I didn't allow it. I mean, I accepted it and I appreciated it, and I constantly appreciated it. And so it taught so many valuable lessons about appreciation. And I mean, I was a grateful person before, but I think it took it to a whole new level.
Sure.
So I think it helps with empathy and understanding.
Well, a couple things, and thanks for sharing that, Peggy, because I know you went through some dark times there, and Kelly and I were very inspired on how you handled it. And I'm not surprised the outcome, where you are today. But you want to go back to this. You mentioned your Power Life script, and that is a form of an affirmation. And an affirmation to me is a command that we set out there to the universe, the ethers, whoever, God. And I love affirmations because most people spend a lot of time talking about what they don't want. And an affirmation is a way to just set it on autopilot, and you're talking and thinking about what you do want. And so your Power Life script is basically, how would you describe that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you think about it, sort of starts this way. What would you love? How would you love to be living your life? And don't let any limiting beliefs or any limitations come into your consciousness. Just think, if I'm waving around a magic wand, what would you ask for? What would you love to experience? And then what does that feel like? What are you doing? Like, you want to make it, as Neville Goddard says, vivid to your senses. What are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And so you write this description of your life, like, let's say you want a dream home. I'm so happy and grateful I'm living in my beautiful dream home. I love every inch of it. I love looking up and seeing the high ceilings, and I love the bright light that comes in, and our property is so private and gorgeous, and we're right backing onto a lake, and the view is incredible, and the sunset's right in front of me. Even if that's not there, you write it all as if it's there. I mentioned my husband, Denny, he was in my script. He was in my Power Life script long before he showed up in physicality in my life. And so I wrote about, being happily married to this wonderful man, which I am. Well, it's been 18 years now, but it was all scripted. The homes that I bought, the waterfront properties that I bought, the vehicles that I drive, my business that I run, my New York Times bestseller, like, all of it was all scripted. And it's like, we're creators. I was essentially creating the future in advance by writing it in the present tense. And so I write it, I record it. You record it once. You don't have to record it every, day. You record it and then you listen to it. Now, why is that valuable? because it's coming in your consciousness. You're impressing it into your subconscious mind. You don't even have to be actively listening to it for it to make an impression in your mind. And that's how my life really changed. That's where everything changed, like, significantly. That's my experience of skipping levels, was when I started to just listen to it every day, multiple times, every single day. I wake up in the morning and plug my earbuds in and start listening to it every day. Now, there's some mornings I may not feel like it. Like, I'll wake up and think, oh, I should probably get up and get started. It's like, no, I'm going to lay here while I'm in a relaxed state. I'm going to impress my mind.
Discipline. I know you're highly disciplined, but I love that because it helps us stay out of these short-term scarcity gaps, I think, where we're thinking short-term, and it's easy to get locked in the wrong mindset. We got to keep a big perspective and keep compelling goals out in front of us. And that's a great way to do it. So thanks for sharing that, Peg. Honey, do you have any final questions for Peggy? We're coming up on an hour, and I told her we wouldn't take more than an hour. We could sit here and talk all day. I know we're just touching the tip of the iceberg with Peggy McColl, but honey, do you have anything else you want to end with?
Yes, I have a question that I always like to ask all the guests. And if you, which obviously you're very descriptive with your words, but in regards to forgiveness, I'd love for you to share your definition, what it looks like, what it feels like in your life when you experience it, and share it.
Well, I like that. I would say, forgiveness to me means letting go of anything that doesn't feel good. That's just releasing, letting go. Now, there's another way that you can approach it. You could wrap your loving arms around it and say, okay, I'm grateful for the lesson that has brought me, but I'm going to release you because this is not going to serve me, and I'm going to focus on the good. But I think about the definition of forgiveness is releasing anything that doesn't serve you.
And what would you say to that person that's saying, I want to do it, but I can't let go of it?
Well, you can. If you're saying that you can't, then you won't, but you absolutely can. And you just have to make a decision. Like, how do you think this is serving you? It's not. It's hurting you. It's like that expression that it's like you taking poison and expecting it to hurt another. It's not going to hurt the other. It's only going to hurt you. So if you love yourself, you've got to let it go. So stop saying can't. I remember Bob Proctor used to, jump on people when they said that they can't do something. He'd say, stop saying that. Now, I know that sounds simple, but if there's, can you see a way that you could, or have you seen other people that have done it? I mean, we're talking about it right here. You guys are an example of that. I'm an example of that. Yes. So you can see how someone else has done it. Well, could you see how you could do it too, perhaps, maybe even a little bit, and just start to seek to have a better feeling state, and you'll get there. But it does take a decision.
Yeah, it does. And we know the importance of decisions and the ability to make decisions. But also, I think I'm going to throw this thought in there that if we're holding on to something at some level, even if it's negative, we must be getting something out of it, because we wouldn't be engaged in some behavior that at some level we're not perceiving a benefit. And so I think when we're holding on to something, forgiveness or whatever it is, that's not serving us or the greater good, I think we need to go inside and ask why we're doing that and what at some level are we benefiting. And maybe we haven't even become aware of it, but there is something there at some level. So I appreciate you sharing that, Peggy. And Peg, before we wrap up, let's let our millions of listeners know where they can contact the great Peggy McColl. Could you share your website and so forth, Peggy, so people know where to reach you and read your books, learn from you? Because I can tell, audience, I can't end this without sharing that, this is, as you know, Peg, it's a long story, but I found Peggy McColl on the internet, and I know this was not a random thing. I know now, looking back, that I was led to Peggy. And I'm glad I clicked that link and went back to that link again, because I clicked out and then something told me, I know that it's my intuition now, told me to reach out to Peggy. And that was, I don't know, gosh, what was that, 10 years ago, Peggy, or longer? And at the time, Kelly and I were trying to figure out how to get the Ravine, the book that we had just finished, out and to the world. And Peggy, that's one of the things Peggy's a master at, is book publishing, writing, and distribution. And she helped us, and we formed a great relationship with Peggy and friendship. And Peggy was the person, again, that introduced us to Bob Proctor. And so, Peggy, we just love you in so many ways, and you're such a great teacher. And I just want the audience to know how they can contact you.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Well, it's certainly a blessing in my life. And I love your book, The Ravine, and the movie. Everybody should watch it and get the book and read it as well. My website is my name, PeggyMcColl.com, PeggyMcColl.com.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's where you can reach Peggy McColl. And Peggy, thanks so much. It was such a pleasure. I know we could go into many more topics today, but we're going to wrap it right here. And audience, again, whenever you tune in, our objective here on Time for Forgiveness is to learn, grow, and be inspired. And I know I'm always inspired when I have a chance to visit with Peggy, and Kelly feels the same way. So thank you again, Peg. Kelly, any ending words before we sign off?
I just really appreciate it because it's everything that you have shared. It's just causing me to think. And it's causing me to kind of reflect and look at my own behavior and really ask, is there something still in my life that I need to forgive and let go of? So I appreciate the nudge.
I appreciate you both. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Peg. Thank you. And again, everyone, until the next episode, stay tuned in and learn, grow, and be inspired, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.